はい、皆さん、こんにちは。米国特許セミナーパテントターミノロジーです。このシリーズでは、特許用語、表現などをできるだけわかりやすく解説しています。講師は、米国特許弁護士であるブライアン・エプスタインさんです。今回は、Adjoining, Adjacent, Bordering の違いと、at least one of A and B と at least one of A or B の違いについて見ていきたいと思います。ではまず、adjoining, adjacent, bordering の違いについてです。これらは隣接などと訳されることが多いんですが、これらの違いについてブライアンさんにご解説いただきます。Okay, Brian さん。隣接 is typically translated as adjoining, adjacent, or bordering. How would you differentiate between these terms?
They're pretty similar. So we'll take a pretty detailed look at these different translations for rinsetsu. So for adjoining, we're looking at definition 2 in Merriam-Webster. And this defines the phrase as lying next to or in contact with. I don't have quotation marks here because I'm actually paraphrasing. Typically, during past sessions, we've been able to quote the definitions exactly. If you look adjoining up in Merriam-Webster's dictionary, it won't read exactly the way we have it here, but it's very close, obviously. For translating rinsetsu as adjacent, definition 1b is having a common endpoint or border. So in most cases, we'll be looking at the border, which brings us to the next potential translation, which is bordering. And this is defined as touching at the edge or boundary or bounding. So these words are often substituted in translations for connected. I don't know if rinsetsu is translated as connected, but we receive claims from Japan that will recite the term connected. And under broadest reasonable interpretation, U.S. examiners often interpret connected to include both direct and indirect connections. And this indirect connection translation is a big issue because it can be a very indirect connection. It can be from my mouth to this microphone through my, headphone cable, through the internet to, our audiences around the world. That could be connected at the USPTO because broadest reasonable interpretation is more like the broadest interpretation that can be explained. It doesn't usually mean reasonable the way that most people expect. The one exception that I've personally encountered is in circuits. Typically, the circuits examiners interpret connected in the sense that applicants intend, right? If I say a resistor is connected to a capacitor, that doesn't mean they're just somewhere on a breadboard or circuit board. It means that, the resistor connects to the capacitor. But as a result of this broad interpretation of connected, a lot of times U.S. attorneys have to amend the word connected to be one of these three phrases. Which one you choose will depend on technology. It might depend on the specific figures that you're relying on, because typically There's no text description in the specification. So we're just looking at the figures. Maybe, one of the potential definitions, or I'm sorry, potential translations makes more sense in a given context than another. But in most cases, personal preference will dictate the choice of these three potential terms. Personally, I prefer adjacent, but certainly I've used adjoining, I've used bordering. Frequently, we will ask examiners during interviews if they have a preference among these. Maybe they like one, or they think that one is more suitable for a particular patent application than another one. So, feel free to choose any of these three, but keep in mind that, we're speaking generally here. And of course, as always, the particular selection might depend on the facts of your case.
はい。では次に、at least one of A and B と at least one of A or B の違いについてです。これらは日本語の何々のうちの少なくとも一つに対応するんですが、これらの使い分けについて聞いてみたいと思います。So, Brian さん、少なくとも一つ can be translated as at least one of A and slash or B. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Sure. So I'm going to try and pronounce this one once, but not more than once. 少なくとも一つ. For this, historically, U.S. practice disfavored the term and/or in claims. The reasoning was that this was indefinite. When patent examiners looked at this phrase, they asked attorneys, does this mean and, or does this mean or? And because it has these two different definitions, it's indefinite under previous U.S. practice. It probably still is now, but it was very strongly considered indefinite before. I'm not certain, but I'm pretty sure I've seen an old MPEP section even suggest that. Like, that's how clear a rule this was. So this then led to a concern about whether the term or is inclusive or exclusive, right? So the idea is that, well, maybe the word or itself is indefinite at the USPTO. And I don't know that I've seen anything seen anything in writing to that effect. But, people who have practiced for a long time tell the young attorneys a lot of stories, and I've certainly heard it from very experienced attorneys that once upon a time, the word or was just indefinite. And part of that is whether it's inclusive or exclusive. And so by inclusive, we mean that A or B can include the combination of A and B, right? So it's A, it's B, it's A and B. In English, we also have this sense of an exclusive or. And so it's A, it's B, but it cannot be A and B. It's exclusive of those. It's only one of A or only one of B only. So to get around this issue where and/or is indefinite, or the phrase or is indefinite, American practitioners use the phrase at least one of A and B. And if you go through old Board of Patent Appeals and Interferences, because these cases are at least that old. That's not necessarily in any of the more recent patent trial and appeal board cases, because this is an older rule. You might even see them in CCPA, Court of Claims and Patent Appeals decisions. I'm not sure. I haven't checked them in there, but I definitely have BPAI cases weighing in on this as and approving of the phrase at least one of A and B. The issue is that in 2017, the Patent Trial and Appeal Board decided this case called Ex parte Young, in which at least one of A and B was interpreted in an unexpected manner as meaning at least one of A and at least one of B, right? So before it was at least one of A, it could have been A, or it was a way to avoid saying A or B. It was intended to mean the same as A or B without using the word or. Now, at least one of A and B was interpreted as requiring both A and B, right? It's the exact same words as A and B. It ignores, well, it doesn't ignore the phrase at least one of. It means that there could be more than one of A, and there could be more than one of B. Arguably, it ignores the phrase at least one of, depending on how you want to view this inconsistency or disagreement. And that was supposed to be a fact-specific decision. But the PTAB then designated Jung as informative. So that means that going forward, this would be the definition that would be typically applied throughout the patent office, because informative decisions establish the normal rules. And so in a particular case, applicants might argue, well, the normal rules don't apply. We mean something different based on our specification. But it would, because this was a traditional practice for many patent attorneys, particularly those with a lot of experience or those that had taught people, those with a lot of experience that had taught a younger generation, or a younger generation that had learned from a more experienced generation, we'd be stuck arguing that, it shouldn't be interpreted this way because this is a change in rules. And so the patent attorneys got upset, and the PTAB subsequently de-designated the case. So now Jung is no longer considered informative, which in some ways is even more confusing because, do we act like it was never informative, or do we act like that's not the rule? What does it mean to de-designate a case? I'm not sure. I mean, it's certainly it's going to be fact specific anyway. But as a result, a lot of applicants don't want to touch this issue at all. They're trying to come up with something that is not the phrase at least one of A and B, because it's unsettled. Jung was supposed to settle the issue, and now it's more confusing than ever. And so a lot of applicants now use the phrase at least one of A or B. The PTO has clarified recently that, by recently, I probably mean the last 10 years, that or is no longer an issue for claims. And so at least one of A or B, by extension, suggests it's at least one of A, or it's at least one of B, and, it could be more than those because, it could be at least one of A in addition to at least one of B. Because, these are typically recited in a comprising claim, and so they're open-ended, and they can include more features than just one of A, at least one of A, or exclusive or at least one of B. So yeah, so that's the phrase to use.
Okay. はい、ブライアンさん、ありがとうございました。今回は、adjoining, adjacent, bordering の違いと at least one of A and slash or B の違いについて詳しく解説いただきました。で、今回はこれで以上になります。ご質問や使ってほしいトピックなどがありましたら、YouTube のコメント欄に書いていただくか、スライド最後に記載のメールアドレスまでお気軽にご連絡ください。では本日もありがとうございました。失礼します。